times it's already online when
All
it's,
right. I think we're on live. Good morning.
I think so too. And
Hello.
we're going to be any second. So the
Yep,
internet, so there we go. We're
I got
online.
it live. Good
Right.
morning.
Excellent.
Grand Rising, everyone. Thursday, what's today's date, Jeff? I'm a little off this morning.
Today's the 5th.
Today's the 5th.
5th
That's
of
right.
September.
That's
Yeah.
right. Happy
Exactly.
Friday, everyone. How are you, Jeff?
I'm all right.
Very
Except
good.
today's Thursday, not Friday. So
Oh my God. I told you I was a little off this morning.
it's okay. It's all right. Don't worry about it. It ain't that deep.
There you go. Thursday,
I
the
mean, I've
5th.
been a
Thank
little
you.
off this whole month. I got to tell you, that new moon really wiped me out. In fact, the reason, we canceled the podcast on Tuesday was I had the dates wrong, or not the date, I had the year wrong on Kamala Harris, and I had AM instead of PM. So we just it was too much to redo it. So I just figured, well, let's pick it up on Thursday. So we're
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Here we go. You're a little staticky sounding, I think, but
Oh.
maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I shouldn't be. I should be nice and clear. But
Yeah.
anyhow, yeah. So we've got, some really breaking news just happened. Hunter Biden apparently in California here has pleaded guilty to his tax charges because they didn't want all the hoopla. And he could get up to 17 years
Wow.
for his tax evasion charges. So if that's true, and it does seem like it is, that's pretty substantial. And of course, now that Biden dropped out of the race, watch him pardon him, and say, "Don't worry about a thing, kid. We'll get you right out of this." So
Yeah. Wow. I didn't hear that. That is pretty big news. I'm sure we're gonna
yeah,
have a
just
lot of
that.
big news coming rolling out over the next couple months. A
Well, that's
lot.
it. Yeah, I've had a couple of people say to me, "Well, geez, nothing happened on the new moon and everything else." Well, I didn't say it would. What I'm saying is Uranus is stationing and going retrograde and going over that fixed star between now and the 13th or 14th of October. So look for crazy stuff to happen as we bear on in September into October because they're going to pull something. There's no way. I mean, the real numbers on Harris's polls, I think, are much, much lower, and they know that. And of course, we're already beginning to hear about the Russian Disinformation Act and everything else that's going on, influencing the Trump campaign and everything. So it's virtual insanity. I mean, what's going on? Ichabod Crane, who I also call Garland, and Ray, his cohort, were on the news yesterday talking about how this is all prosecution of, they're going to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law, everything connected with, the Russian disinformation. They're doing the same thing they did back in 2016. So it's really going to be an interesting scenario here when this whole thing spills out onto the election. So we got a Sun Saturn opposition that's completing this Saturday at about 9:30 p.m. I always dislike Sun Saturn oppositions. A lot of people have said, yeah, but I got that in my birth chart. It's different in a person's birth chart than it is mundane wise. And it affects everybody differently. But in general, I don't like anybody doing contracts or anything that's important on Sun Saturn oppositions because it always causes a problem. So the good news is that'll be over with this Saturday. And of course, we come into a new moon next week on the 12th. Which is not a new moon, a new quarter moon. So this will be the first quarter after this new moon. So that's where we're at. I wanted to talk a little bit about this debate. Everybody's all up in the air about this debate situation, which is coming up, and that of course is happening on the 10th. And it's going to be very interesting. I did take a look at Harris's chart now that I have the right data on it. And one of the things that I was noticing is she's going to probably be pretty aggressive because Mars is in her first house. I might share the screen on that real quick. I'll just show you what I did is I took a screenshot. And what I did is I just took Harris's chart here. You can see here on the screen. This is her birth chart now. And this is her birth chart on the inner wheel here. And the outer wheel is her transits. And she's got Mars transiting the very first house. So that often makes people pretty aggressive. She's going to be pushy, I would expect. And I was looking at just the general overall outlay of what was going on in her chart versus Trump's chart. And one of the things that I've really become a fan of more and more is the progressions in Nadi astrology. This is Harris's chart here. This is the inner box here is Kamala Harris's chart. And she's actually pretty smart. You know, I have to say, she's not a stupid person. She's got Mercury and Libra with the sun. And I wouldn't say she's stupid by any means. What it shows is she's an ineffective communicator. And the reason why she's got Mars debilitated in the second house. The second house in Vedic and Nadi astrology has always been considered your ability to speak and your resources. So she's got Mars there, and that's why she might get kind of scrambled. It's not a good placement to have a debilitated Mars. See, her Mars is in Cancer in her second house. The big thing is, and this might be a little bit hard to see on the internet and YouTube here, but these green numbers here are years of ages of life in progression. Well, Kamala Harris is about to turn 60 years old here, right, in October. She's 59 years old, 10 months and 14 days as we speak. So when I got the computer right here, notice at 59.7 years old, I'm circling that right there. It's probably a little hard to see, but maybe people can zoom in. She's going to move into a 12-year progression of Jupiter over what we call her Earth trines. Now you might say, okay, so what? What does this mean? Well, it shows the last 12 years have actually been much better for her because it was over her Venus, it trined her Ketu, and it also aspected her moon. See, in Nadi astrology, that's how you do that. You look at the elements, the fire trines, what's behind it, what's before it, and what it makes. So in terms of aspects. So she's leaving a very powerful place and going into, by progression, a much weaker place for anybody who can't see. That's what it means in plain English. So that was one major thing that I looked at. And, you know, when I look at, again, you know, everybody hates Donald Trump, but I would tell you that his chart actually looks much stronger. And the reason why, I'll show you in Donald Trump's chart, he has Jupiter transiting his 10th house. See, I'll put up his transits here. And that's just the way it is. I mean, if you look at, that's Donald Trump's ascendant right here. So we go across as the 7th, that's the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. So you can see transiting Jupiter is in his 10th house. So he's actually a lot stronger. It takes Jupiter 12 years to go around the chart. And when we go back to Harris's chart, she's got the Jupiter transiting her 12th house, which is nowhere near as strong. You can see this is Harris's ascendant right there. That's what the ASC means. And Jupiter is in her 12th house and won't cross her ascendant until next spring. So just inherently, I always look at, you know, Jupiter's not the only planet an astrologer looks at, but that's certainly one big indicator because Jupiter takes about a year to go through a sign. And it's a big indicator on where your energy is emphasized in the chart. And having it in the 12th house always kind of makes you feel like you're under a damp cloth, you know, and the fire just can't get going. And, you know, when it's in the 10th house, you're up to bat. And Trump's up to bat. And even though I think they're going to really manipulate this election, I think they're going to throw all kinds of curveballs at it any way they can. Trump's chart just inherently overall by transit looks a lot stronger than Harris's chart. Harris also just had a Saturn return. You can see that here. And if Harris did get in, I can tell you next spring, she starts something called Sadhisate. You might say, well, what does that mean? Sadhisate is a word in Vedic astrology that means it's a 7.5-year period where Saturn transits the sign before the moon, the sign over the moon, and the sign after the moon. And it's a very karmically intense time. It can be good and it can be challenging. Most astrologers say, oh, it's all bad. No, I've actually seen very good things happen on that. But I also see challenging things too. So it depends on the configurations in the chart. And with that progression that Harris has going on in the Nadi astrology that I showed earlier, definitely to me shows that it's not an opportune time for her, even though they're shoving her out in the limelight. So going to be interesting to see where this election goes. The interrogations I've had so far, it looks like, it does look like Trump wins. And I know a lot of people aren't going to want to hear that because, oh, he's leaning right. I'm not leaning anyway. I'm just reading the chart. So it's the way the chart's leaning at this point. I do think Trump is in some grave danger. He is not over with yet. Trump has Uranus not only squaring his Mars, which is exceedingly dangerous, between now all the way up until spring. It happens 2 more times, but it also crosses his midheaven. Now, they literally read the verdict on Donald Trump's conviction in New York exactly when Uranus hit the midheaven. Also, Donald Trump turned his head and missed a bullet, raised a bullet, I'll say, right exactly when Mars conjuncted Donald Trump's midheaven. So he's not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. And I know there's an emergency hearing right now to move to federal court this prosecution and sentencing date, which I believe comes up or is due to come up on the 18th, from what I heard. And I could be wrong on that, but I heard it's about the 18th of this month of September. So we're going to see them throw everything in the kitchen sink at Trump to try and stop him, because this is about to get Trump. And you can see, we don't have news anymore. We have propaganda. I mean, it's just fascinating to stand back and watch this 3-ring circus of media going on. And pretty interesting stuff.
Yep, it is. It is certainly a show. Certainly a show. Well, what else did you want to get into today, Jeff? I know you were talking to me about certain energies that are rolling into next year that you wanted to speak to about a little bit.
Yeah, well, the main thing is, in terms of what's going on is this Uranus. And again, we've been speaking a lot about this. Uranus, every 84 years, goes around the chart. And what's happening is it is raking over the Pleiades right now. And most importantly, this fixed star Caput Algol. And Uranus is going to go retrograde and start to station right in January. Well, right at the end of December and into January, and then it'll station and go direct. And it's doing so over a very powerful fixed star. We're going to talk more about that. But these are not pleasant fixed stars. They tend to bring a lot of agitation. And what we're not hearing with the constant white noise of the election is a lot of the stuff that's going on over in Israel. I mean, Netanyahu was just on speaking about how he's got redder lines now than he's ever had before, meaning that he said this war could end in 3 days if they would release the hostages, which Hamas is not doing. So, and there's strong evidence that Iran is funding all this. Well, who's funding Iran? It certainly seems like the Biden administration has had a lot to do indirectly with funding that, or the owners is a better way to put it. And the same thing that's going on over in Ukraine. We've got Ukraine actually infiltrating into Russia with drones and attacks, and there's been some very severe attacks back and forth that have gotten very little press. And of course, we see a lot of totalitarianism going on in the UK and Germany. I'm also hearing more rumblings of China, over there in the South Pacific, with not only Taiwan, but just getting aggressive in general. And I talked to Australians who said in the northern part of Australia, there's a huge buildup. The U.S. is building all kinds of, extensions to bases and fortifying them. So the world is in an interesting place. And I hope we do not see any World War III or anything else, but it's very, very much a possibility that something very dangerous could happen here. And that's one news broadcast away. And of course, North Korea and many of these other regimes are becoming very emboldened right now. And this is a fact. When you really look into the news, if you can find it, it's a very dangerous time. And we're seeing that the astrology is mirroring that. And of course, we also got the Pluto third and final return in the sidereal zodiac happening at the end of this year, right in December, when Uranus stations and goes over another very powerful fixed star called Denebola. So this is, intense stuff that's going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's hope
Definitely.
nothing happens. I hope, we get through this with just more, you know, political bending and changing, and hopefully for the better. And we get through this without any major wars, because, and with the weaponry today, we do not want to see war. It's much more than just nuclear war. When you look at the directed energy weapons, you look at the lasers and the chemical stuff and the biological warfare. Not a war I'd like to see happen. I'll tell you that.
No, no, for sure not. Well, I don't know if you wanted to address a few questions that we had on the last live that we weren't able to touch on because we ran out of time. There were a number of them. We can't go through all of them, but definitely there were a few questions. So are you open to that right now?
Sure, why not?
All
Absolutely.
right.
Let's do it.
All right. So we've got, let's see here. I want to make sure I get all the way back there. Well, some of these do require the casting of a chart, so maybe we can't touch on those today.
I got to watch my time today. I don't have a lot of time this morning. I've got appointments coming up, and I got to prepare for it. So I got to kind of knock off here right at 9:30 our time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So why don't we address oh, we did this one. Someone was asking someone asked again if you've ever done a chart for Daskalos. So that's something we've got to look into.
Yeah, actually, I have never done a chart for Daskalos. I'll tell you though, in a meditation, he actually visited me once. This was probably Daskalos died in 2001, and he had a stroke. And for anybody who doesn't know who we're speaking about, this is the man who's known as the Magus of Strovolos, the book that I mention often, a profound book. Again, I always say I'd like to throw this book out of helicopters and have everybody read it before they pass away, because he goes into who are we as spirits having a physical, or souls having a physical experience. And he gets much into astral travel, healing, and he actually visited me once in a meditation, and profound man. I mean, profound man, very, very interesting soul, and very advanced soul. He is someone I would definitely call an ascended master. But no, I've never done a chart for him. In fact, I don't even have his birth time. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Well, here's one. Do you think the current political scene is being played out, that's being played out? Are these parties also looking at the astrology?
That I don't know. I can't answer to that. I know a lot of people in politics I have as clients. I don't know, because the Trump campaign is very close to the vest. I can't speak a word about Kamala Harris. I do have clients who know Kamala Harris, who actually in law enforcement and in legal have been around her. I've actually had two clients. I just had one recently who knew her, actually worked in a courtroom with her, and very interesting. They didn't have anything real bad to say about her. They said she was kind of a suit, and Tulsi Gabbard and many others have said that she's done some very questionable things, keeping people in jails that should have been out, and also letting a lot of people go that shouldn't have been let go. So I can't speak directly to anything on that, but yeah, I mean, I know Reagan and many people that I have as clients look at it. I've actually worked on, releasing campaigns at certain times, signing, campaign entrances at certain times, and looking at cycles that were going on during a person's political career. But I do not have any direct involvement with Trump or Harris's campaigns at this, that I could say they're using it. I can tell you the owners do. That's my opinion. When I say the owners, I'm talking about the people who really run this place. Because you got to remember, George Carlin was probably right. Not only do they want obedient workers, they want obedient politicians. And we see this obedience to the adherence of the agenda when we really look at what's happening. And this isn't conspiratorial thinking either, or speech. It's true. I actually had a teacher once, it was way back in the early 90s. He was in London doing a lot of electional astrology, which is picking an auspicious time to make moves, sign contracts, or initiate events. And also what they call prashna, which is what Western astrologers refer to as horary astrology, meaning asking questions. And he did a lot of that for the financial district. Exactly who that was, I don't know. But personally, I think that's where the owners are. They run the financial institution. We may have gotten our independence from England, but I don't think we've gotten our financial independence. And I think it was George Washington that said, if anyone ever gets to print our money, they will be more dangerous than any standing army. And we can thank Woodrow Wilson because he signed it into law with the Federal Reserve Act. And these are the owners. And I don't care what anybody says, called conspiracy theory or whatever. I know that I've heard directly that they are emphatic with astrology. In fact, when you look at COVID, it's exactly when it happened was the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Could have set your watch to it. And the same thing, 9/11. If I go back and look at even Nixon taking us off the gold standard, there was things all the way back. In fact, World War I started right next to a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So there's a lot of cycles that line up. And people, the skeptics will say, yeah, well, that's just coincidence. Well, it sure seems like some pretty interesting coincidence because when you look back in history, a lot of these events didn't just happen. They were funded to happen, or they took a lot of pre-planning and infrastructure to make happen. Like, for instance, take Hitler. He was funded from 1933. That's a long time. And yet the war didn't really start kicking out until the early 40s. So, it's very interesting how these things, just like what we're seeing in the Middle East right now, Iran had the floodgates open for their monies. And of course, it's pouring into there and has been ever since the Biden administration got in. And now we're seeing the results 2 or 3 more years later. So, these things are often very well known, I think, in the upper echelons. And personally, I think there's a lot of demonic infiltration into these groups. I really do. There's no other reason they would do what they do or the way that they do it if they had any kind of compassion for humanity and creation.
Oh, no, absolutely. And isn't it interesting how it all aligns with the astrology, though? That's what somebody brought up earlier.
Yeah, it really does. I have to say, 9/11, again, I mentioned this before. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, Arch Crawford. He's a financial astrologer, and Arch is getting pretty on in years now. We were on the phone, and I remember he and I both saying something's going to happen. And sure enough, the next day, on a Saturn-Pluto opposition, we saw 2 planes smoldering in the buildings. And then, of course, they blew them down like sparklers, jet fuel. So that, again, was a very interesting scenario when you look at Building 7 and all the other things. I've actually had architects who are clients of mine who said, we are structural engineers. That's no possibility a plane could have brought that building down like that. And again, that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of Army Corps engineers. So pretty interesting stuff. And again, happened right on the astrology.
Yeah. Well, we've got Sybil here, and she also asked this on Thursday. What position was the moon in when Trump started his campaign? Do you know that? Remember that offhand?
I do not. No, I do not know the official date and time that Trump started his campaign. That I can't speak to. So I don't know exactly when he filed. It's probably available, but I did not look at that. The thing I would look at, and a lot of astrologers spend a lot of time looking at election day. How does the astrology line up? And I find there's some efficacy there. There's no question, and we can do that. But I find one of the more accurate things that I have seen in the past was prashna, or interrogation astrology, or horary, whichever you want to call it, asking a question, and also looking at the general background cycles of a person's progressions and transits. And I have to say, like, Trump is not out of the woods because he's got Uranus going back and forth over his 10th house, which is disruption and change in direction of career. Now, sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be very challenging. And of course, like I said, they read that verdict exactly. I mean, it was creepy how accurate it was when Uranus joined his midheaven almost to the minute and second. It was very, very close. When they read the guilty verdict in New York on that thing back in June, Uranus was right on his midheaven. Well, it's coming back over his midheaven again, and it's also squaring Mars. And again, he had Mars conjunct his midheaven. So, again, the things I was mentioning earlier about Harris having the Jupiter in the 12th house, she's also got Saturn over Saturn. It was a very karmic time for her. And, Jupiter in the 12th house isn't a real extroverted time. And notice she's been avoiding the press. She's not been speaking to the press at all. I think she's going to be very aggressive, or try to be, during this debate. We did cast an interrogation on the debate, and it showed the same thing. See, I did that before I had her birth time, right? And that's still, I would stand by that. It doesn't look like the debate. Of course, the media will bend it every which way. Of course, they're always going to say their candidate wins, and the other side will say their candidate wins, because, everything's polls now. You're not allowed to think. You're allowed to hear what the polls say. And of course, they never sample us. I've never been called on a poll. And nobody else I know has ever been called on a poll. And yet they have all these polls that tell us what to think, right? They beat us over the head with the big club telling us what to think. So interesting. I would tend to say Trump will prevail in this. And again, I'm not leaning right or anything else. I'm just reading the chart or left. That's what the interrogation said, that Harris is going to get a little word salad going at times. And again, I think that's her Mars in the second house in the Vedic astrology. What that does is it tends to make speech be either scrambled or aggressive. It's a debilitated Mars. See, if she had an exalted Mars in the second house, meaning Mars is strong, that would really help her. See, that's another reason why a lot of people think Trump is very abrasive, is because he's got Mars in the ascendant. See, so that gives people an edge. They're pushy, they're very pensive. So a lot of people love Trump, and a lot of people hate him. And that's the Mars in his ascendant. But that gives him personal assertion, and Trump's Mars is actually very strong in the ascendant, because it's what we call the Yoga Karaka chart, or a planet. Yoga Karaka is a fancy word in Vedic astrology. It means it's the chart indicator. Why? Because Trump is Leo rising, and Mars rules his 9th and his 4th house. It's very, very powerful. So it's always going to give him an edge wherever Mars is. So he's got a strong Mars, whereas Harris has a very weak Mars. Again, I'm not favoring Trump or disfavoring Harris. I'm just reading the chart. So when you have a debilitated Mars, that can bring insecurities often. See, her Mars is in Cancer, so it's emotional stuff. And being in the second house of speech, that's kind of what she does. Also, I looked up her ascending degree. She's born in the degree of unraveling. It's kind of, the metaphor is someone sitting on a heap of junk trying to unravel all this mess that they're in. And again, I'm not here disfavoring Kamala Harris. I think she's actually smart, having Mercury in Libra. She's, you don't become an attorney being stupid. It takes a lot to pass a bar exam. But I think her communication ability is not very good. She's not a great orator. Trump is not a great orator either. He's, Ronald Reagan, whether you like Reagan or not, I thought was a great orator. He could tell stories. He got people to listen to him. He was a very good orator. Bill Clinton was good at speaking too, even though he was a character. But, I find Trump is a better orator than Kamala Harris. He's going to be more forceful and more direct, where Harris is going to be kind of nebulous and not on focus based on what I see in her chart. And again, that angel on the ascendant for Kamala Harris is kind of unraveling. It's never organized and focused. It's kind of nebulous and unraveling. So it's again, someone sitting in a room full of junk that they're trying to assimilate. That's the metaphor. Yeah.
Really, really interesting. Let me toss this last one at you. This is for Kazmir. So glad to have you join us as always, and everyone. Is there a way to get rid of social anxiety according to astrology?
Well, there's a lot of mantras And gemstones are so effective for that. I prescribe gemstones for people, and it balances the yogas in your chart. Um, Depending on the dasha you're in. Now, for anyone not familiar, a dasha is a time period that you're in. See, remember we had mentioned, in fact, I don't know if I did mention, but Kamala Harris right now, she is in a Rahu dasha. So everyone has different transits or progressions in their charts. And I've actually had parents have me get gems for their children. And of course, you got to watch young children. If they're in school, they can lose the gem or somebody will steal it. But it has a real calming effect to get the proper gem on you. Also, there's mantras that you can do. Mantras are quite profound because there are many different mantras and prayers, if you will, that are used to balance the imbalances in your chart. And of course, I have to see the chart in order to know that. But and I found they're very effective. They're meditations that you do. You light a candle, you light some incense. By the way, I had a client the other day compliment you, Ella, that she started burning Nag Champa because you burn Nag Champa every morning on the lives.
I do. I do.
Yeah, you can see it right there. See?
Don't start my day without Nag Champa. It's incredible in terms of grounding. So many good energies come out of that.
Well, there's so many things you can do. Color, light therapy. See, this gets into Vastu, where fragrances, colors, fabrics, the bed you sleep on, the direction you sleep. This is stuff that I do for people. I've actually done dental offices. I did a really wonderful dental clinic up in Pasadena, California, where the doctor had me work with the architect before any of the construction was done. And we laid out all the rooms and the heavy equipment, you know, where the processing was done and the pumps and everything were all done by Vastu. And of course, we were able to alter the entrance so that it was facing the east and really wonderful. And we had the chairs laid out because it was a pediatrics kind of dental office for younger kids. And I've done a lot of this. I've done spiritual centers, done offices with architects, and fabrics that you use, colors and fragrances. Like frankincense is a very calming fragrance for people. So is myrrh. Myrrh rules Saturn. There's some really cool stuff. And this stuff goes back into the core elements of archangels that vibrate with this stuff. See, a lot of people recognize, you know, they brought gifts of frankincense and myrrh, right? So very interesting stuff. So gemstones, fragrances, and incenses too. See, Nag Champa is a very good blend of fragrances. And many people have said that not only that, but sound. See, that's where mantra comes in. There's an old legend that bells chase away demons. Isn't that interesting? Churches use bells, right? Now, how many bells do we see anymore? They're almost all destroyed. And the bell seems to have a frequency, and many people are using bowls, you know, these healing bowls at different frequencies and bells, which I love. I love that stuff. Just like if anybody remembers the amazing movie, It's a Wonderful Life, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, right? So
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
more truth to that than we know. I don't know if they get their wings, but I do know that the bells and certain frequencies and sounds. In fact, if you look at the angelic squares called yantras in India, and the Western occultism was full of this, where they had angelic squares with sacred geometry, very, very powerful. Like here, I'll show you one right now that's really cool. I don't know if I have it here. No, I probably don't. But they're amazing. They're yantras. In fact, if you look at in Vedic astrology, even the charts, I have to share a screen here, but even the lotus of the Northern Indian chart is quite profound because what it does, back here, if I put this up, it is believed that the sacred geometry is actually shaped by sound. If anybody's heard of cymatics, and of course, in physics, they talk about the Chaldean plates, where these plates were applied frequency and the sand patterns would shape into sacred geometry. And there's a whole host of yantras I could put on the screen. Now, a lot of people will use those to chant a mantra over and hang them up in the room. And it puts a vibration in the room. So gemstones, fragrances, sacred geometry, all kinds of things. In fact, this is very interesting. Many people in the Tartarian groups say that a lot of these cathedrals and amazing temples were not built by the people they say they were. And of course, India and many of your classic architecture is quite profound to look at. So there's a lot of ways to calm the self. Just plain old meditations. Deep breathing is another one. Breathing in and holding the diaphragm full, and then exhaling after as long as you can hold it. Some people can get up to 60 to 80 seconds holding in if you practice, and then breathe in and out. But breath is another thing, concentrating on the breath. Daskalos, speaking of Daskalos, the Magus of Strolos, has a book that's on my website. It's called Esoteric Practices, and it's full of meditations and breathing techniques to help focus the mind and calm the psyche, the lower conscious mind. In fact, that's, they say, what is the reason most mantras we use is to calm the lower conscious mind. Even the Psalms were chanted at certain intonations in the ancient tale. Pretty interesting stuff.
Yes, very, very. Thank you so much for that, Jeff. Here's the Nag Champa. Anyone who's interested, you can order it right on Amazon. This is a good brand, though.
Yeah,
I'm sure you
it is a good brand. And this is the other one. This is Nag Champa.
Yep. That's the little cones. These are the sticks.
That's the sticks.
Jeff's got the
these are
cones.
So you can see there's little cones inside of there. If I hold it where it's in focus, there we go. Yeah. So they're nice. And it even comes with your little donut. You can put it on so you don't burn
It does, but it's powerful. I've got to say, it's powerful. And so is myrrh, burning myrrh. That's so interesting. The myrrh and the frankincense. Like
you know, myrrh is really good for the gums. It tightens the gums. And so does frankincense if you use it in small amounts.
Yep. We talked about that. I rinse with that every day. I also rinse with oregano oil. Put that right in the irrigator. Wow. Your mouth feels
so much power
amazing.
To essential oils and all of that. Here, I can put a thing here to kind of close with this. There is a wonderful, this is the tree of life. If I can find the doggone thing, where is it here? My desktop's a mess here today. But, yeah, here we go. So there's a wonderful tree, and this gives you the basic correspondences on the tree of life. And as soon as I find it here, looks like it's going to be somewhere right down here. So lots of trees here. Yeah, this is it right here. So you can see frankincense. If I zoom in here a little bit, if it'll allow me, yeah, frankincense, I'll zoom in on the tree here so people can see it a little bit. But the upper Sephira is where Archangel Metatron is. And notice what you see here, frankincense right there. It might be a little hard to see on the screen, but you could see this is the upper, what they call Godhead of divinity. Notice myrrh rules Saturn, and you can see that's myrrh right there. Chamomile, and the color black is for calming. And of course, Hokmah is ruled by eucalyptus and musk, see, and the color gray. So that's to bring wisdom. So it's very interesting how you can get into all kinds of fragrances and colors. Now, here's an interesting one. Most people will remember the quintessential gangster, all your generals. What do? You know, you got Robert Mitchum at the end of The Longest Day, puffing on a cigar. And notice Mars is strengthened by pine and tobacco. I've seen a lot of shamans where they'll use tobacco to create a force. See? And then the sun is ruled by rose and jasmine. See? Jupiter is strengthened by bayberry and cedar. Now, isn't that interesting? Cedar wood gets rid of moths and things. So a lot of efficacy to this stuff. And one of the most prized fragrances in the Middle East back in the old days was patchouli. Why? Patchouli rules Venus. See that? And notice rosemary, which is used in almost all your muscle rubs, is an elegant way to sharpen the mind. I put rosemary on my pulses almost every day when I do readings, because what does it do? Strengthens Mercury. See? And notice lavender fuels the moon. Lavender calms the soul, you see? And then many people in India, Kashmir will probably know this one. In India, sandalwood is used an awful lot because it grounds people to the earth. It's centering and grounding. Also, lemon, carnation, and sandalwood, citrine, olive, russet. It's all fragrances that can be used to ground to the earth. So it's really
Yeah.
cool stuff. And this is not stuff, I'm making up. This is a part of, the ancient basic, core fragrances and colors. So it's
Yeah.
really cool.
But we both use a lot of these.
Oh, yeah.
Before bed, I wash my feet, put the sandalwood oil. It's so good to do that. I know Anastasia, she talks about washing her feet every night before she goes to rest. And I don't know if she uses the sandalwood. I think so, but definitely she washes her feet. And I've been using the sandalwood for years. Patchouli is the first oil I used on you when I started working on your neck. Remember?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And that
Yeah.
really, really helped.
Unbeknownst to people, Ella is an amazing healer. She does absolute deep tissue massage, but more than that, she's a healer. She literally can get in there and feel where things are. I, for years, had gone to practitioners, had all kinds of work done. She got into my C3 neck and healed it, got rid of all the scar tissue using patchouli and pushed it out. I couldn't believe it. I absolutely could not believe it. So,
I love it. I love it. I love helping people in that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, you're
Yeah.
really an amazing healer. And again, massage therapy is important, and I love reflexology, but getting in there and actually working out tension that's released. I remember when you were working on my neck, I actually remember when I was a little kid, I fell out of a garage. That we had a fort up in the garage. I was probably 7 years old, and I flipped and bang right on the cement floor. Actually, chipped my tooth, and I had a big gash in my chin from it. And when you were working out that on my neck, I actually could smell the oil on the garage floor
Yeah.
from 55, 60 years ago when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of emotional recall comes up when you work on people energetically like that, which is good because you want it to come up and come out.
Right.
That's, restricting the energy when it's kept in there like that. So
Yeah, I had a
very
couple of
interesting stuff.
accidents come up when you were working on my neck. I could really feel it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for
You're
this.
welcome.
It's a great one. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As always, we're here Mondays and Thursdays live. Look for Jeff to put out his when are you putting something out, Jeff? Next? Well, definitely we're doing our
Mondays and
monthlies.
Thursdays for right now.
And-
Our schedules have been kind of off. I've been so busy with clients. I mean, I have been like busy with clients, and we're gonna come up with a new schedule soon. You and I are working on that, and also we're working on this new show, which we test piloted a while back, and we're going to be doing a lot more with that coming up. So we'll have, I think, a more definitive schedule. For right now, let's just keep it the Thursday.
Mondays and Thursdays. Yep. Yep. So we'll see you next Monday. Everyone have a great, few days ahead till we see you next time.